press freedom, women participation, fact-checking, discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more, live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom, women participation, fact-checking, discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more, live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom, women participation, fact-checking, discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more, live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom, women participation, fact-checking, discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more, live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom, women participation, fact-checking, discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more, live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom, women participation, fact-checking, discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more, live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom, women participation, fact-checking, discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more, live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom, women participation, fact-checking, discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more, live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom, women participation, fact-checking, discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more, live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. press freedom, women participation, fact-checking, discussion on the forthcoming governorship election, and more, live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom, women participation, fact-checking, discussion on the forthcoming governorship election, and more, live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special.
Good morning and welcome to Premium Times Election Special. My name is Chema Kapo, and we're here again to give you fresh updates of what the elections have been killed by, and of course the aftermath of the presidential elections. Yesterday, we got an announcement from the INEC that the gubernatorial elections had been postponed by 1 week. March 18th is now the date for the gubernatorial elections around the country. And the reason for this postponement, I beg your pardon, is for the beavers of over about 176,000 beavers machines are to be configured, and the INEC asked the court to extend, to grant it, of course, time to configure the beavers, and of course also extend the elections by 1 week. INEC, of course, will also conduct supplementary elections in Adondobua's constituency in Kano. Mr. Dogwa is facing murder charge after he allegedly was involved in a violent disturbance at the 25th February elections and National Assembly, of course, elections that happened in Kano State. INEC cancelled the elections held in the constituency, saying that Mr. Dogwa was declared the winner by the returning officer Ibrahim Kasi under GRS. These are the headlines for this morning from the New York Times, and we will be joined quickly by our reporters in various parts of the country to bring us up to date on the polls of electorate Nigerians in various parts of the countries about the postponement of the gubernatorial elections. And elections we've all been waiting for. And then yesterday we got an announcement about the postponement. We will be joined by Moji Alabi from Lagos, places from and of course others who will join us as well to be up to date. Good morning, Mr. Alabi. Can you hear me?
Hello. Am I audible here?
I can't hear you, Mr. Alabi. If you can hear me.
Yeah. Can you please? Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning.
A very good morning to you. Oh, sorry, good afternoon to you. Maybe you're not in Nigeria. I'm in Nigeria here, so.
Yeah, apologies. Time so fast, but you don't even realize that it's gone. Yeah, good afternoon to you, and thank you. What's going on in Lagos this morning?
Yeah, really, there is nothing much going on in Lagos. Lagosians were expectant that the election will hold on Saturday, but quite unfortunately, there was an announcement of postponement. But very unfortunate, one unfortunate incident happened this morning where we had a kind of accident where I think about 3 lives were lost. Train collided with a staff bus of the Lagos State government. People who were going to work had a kind of accident this morning along Ikeja, and I think we have three workers of Lagos State government. I cannot authenticate whether they're actually workers, but it was a staff bus, and 3 persons have been confirmed dead as of this morning. So that was unfortunate because these Lagosians also set out to get to work. But like I said, Lagosians were expectant that the election will hold on Saturday. I saw a lot of people trying to fill their cylinders. A lot of people trying to get to market, trying to stock their homes, thinking that this election will hold on Saturday. But unfortunately, I know of people who are trying to. In fact, there is a wedding I was supposed to attend this morning. They actually fixed the wedding for today, thinking that Saturday will be election. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear, Mr. Alabi.
Yeah, thank you so much. So that is all we have happening in Lagos this morning. Now that election has been postponed to 18th, the governorship and House of Assembly election have been postponed to 18th. I know
I think that's
with a lot of people asking questions about who will take over the Lagos Secretariat, especially considering the fact that the ruling political party lost the presidential election to the opposition Labour Party in Lagos State. So expectations were high that would the state go with the Labour Party during the governorship election, or is it the People's Democratic Party, the perpetual opposition in the state, would take? But so far, the campaign has been very intense. You have the governor running from pillar to post, taking a lot of decisions that people never believed will have been taken before. You see the governors coming out, meeting local governments, meeting CDAs, visiting communities and things like that. It's part of the impact of the rising opposition in the state. And I think that is good for democracy. That's quite good for democracy. So that is what has been happening in Lagos State as of this afternoon.
yeah. Thank you very much for that very brief update, and sincere heartfelt condolences to families who lost their loved ones in the crash that happened this morning. I quickly want to follow up on the comment you made about the competition. What I like to see it as a healthy competition between major parties in Lagos, the APC, PDP, and LP. It looks like the governorship this year will be heavily contested. We see that the likes of Bebo and Jando are rising to the occasion and perhaps giving someone a run for his money. Is that the case in Lagos today?
I can't get a question. Could you please come
Can
again?
you hear me now? Is it clear now?
Yeah, I think I can hear you now.
Yeah, so of course, I started with extending our heartfelt condolences to the families who lost their loved ones in the crash this morning. Sad incident and a sad way to start the day. And I quickly went over to talk about the comments you made about what was, great for our democracy and the current situation, political landscape, and outlook in Lagos recently. It looks like the governorship election will be one of the most contested in recent times. And I'm asking, what are you seeing? It looks as though Vivo and Jando are giving the incumbent governor someone a run for his money. Is this a perfect representation of what's happening in Lagos today?
Yeah, I think as of this afternoon, it is still the race has been very very hot in the sense that particularly based on what actually transpired during the presidential election. But I still want to believe, like I've always said, that the presidential election cannot be described as the true representation of where the people of Lagos will be on as regards the governorship election. The presidential election is a different ball game, is a different kettle of fish. When you look at what actually the decisions of the people, the ruling party is still very much in control of the situation in Lagos. Out of 24 House of Rep candidates, the ruling party still secured 19. that is very high. That is more than 70%. That's one. Then number two, when you look at the Senate, in fact, even when this ruling party presented three candidates who are Muslims, the three of them still won. I think what actually played out during the presidential election is there are so many factors that contributed to that. One of them is the Muslim ticket of the presidential candidate of the APC, of the ruling party. That's one, because a whole lot of people believe that within the last 7 years or thereabout, there have been some kind of fear, especially with the Boko Haram attacks in the northeast, the banditry in the northwest, and the part of north central, and the headers, famous clashes all over the places. I think that created some kind of fear in Nigerians, that they believe that Nigeria is no longer
There again, we have Mr. Labi with internet glitches. Well, we'll just hold on there with Mr. Labi. Mr. Labi, can you hear me?
Hello, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Am I
Sorry,
still audible?
for a bit. Yeah, I can hear you now. So let's quickly, put a
Hello?
hold on what the situation in Lagos is and move over to you. Good morning, Mr. Alpon. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good morning. I can hear you. Good morning, Chi. How you
Yeah,
doing?
very well, thank you. And you?
I'm very well, thank you.
What's the situation in Rio this morning? How are residents feeling about the postponement of the elections?
I think people are generally not happy with the postponement of the election, because of the currency crisis. So a lot of persons naturally would have wanted the election to come and go so that they could have money into their hands. So a lot of persons believe that why money is not in circulation is because of the election. So I think people are not happy generally.
Interesting. Could you give us a quick rundown on what the presidential elections was like in Rio last week?
Sorry, can you do that again?
A quick rundown on what the presidential election in Rio was like last week.
Okay. Let me use the word. It was shocking. I mean, the Labour Party made an interesting showing in the elections. I mean, so they got everyone surprised. I'm sure PDP, APC never expected that kind of showing from Labour Party in the election. So it got people surprised. I mean, I was able to monitor the election in the urban areas, like in Uyo, not in the rural areas, but in the urban areas. Most of the people who voted for Labour, they were just voting for presidential election. They voted Labour. Of course, that's because of Peter Obi. But surprisingly, they were voting for reps and Senate candidates that they didn't even know. So I may call that the Peter Obi's effect. So I mean, so that's what happened. But nevertheless, I think PDP still made a great impact in the election. They won. They won, and in the federal constituency, they won most of the seats. I mean, Labour has not won any or didn't win any seats for the federal House of Reps, but APC won at least two. So I think two constituencies are yet to be announced because the elections were inconclusive. So PDP still did well in the election, but uh, I must say they were threatened, or they have been threatened by the election, and that has made them to go back to their drawing boards. Thank you.
Yeah, with that, I would really say that our democracy is progressive, regardless of all the um, glitches and inconsistencies we saw in the last election. Now, we quickly want to ask you: do you think that the outcome of the presidential elections, from what you've just said, do you think it will have any effect on the gubernatorial elections next year?
Well, it should have had an effect, but I know that the PDP being rattled, that's the right word, they would have gone back to their drawing boards and then devise strategies to make sure that they come out more victorious in the election. So, well, I also expect, for instance, a party like YPP, which is really coming up in Akwa Ibom. I expect people expect YPP to make a great showing, even much more than APC, because the candidate of YPP is well known, and so I mean he's expected to even do better than the APC, Of course, if you're following the news, or you I'm sure you heard that APC is still having issues with who is their governorship candidate in Akwa Ibom State. So that definitely, even though the Supreme Court is believed to have resolved the matter in favor of APC candidate, or should I call him candidate? He's not yet a candidate because INEC has not declared him yet. Akanodofia. But one thing is, it stand out there that there's so much confusion. Most people don't know if APC is going to be on the ballot. And the man who took him to court, who took the APC to court, a former Senator Itainang, a former presidential aide, came out saying that what the media reported is not true. That the Supreme Court did not give a favorable ruling to Akarodofia. So there's that confusion. So APC is still being plagued by confusion. So that's a situation. The battle mostly appear to be between PDP and YPP as far as governorship is concerned. But I think PDP has an upper hand, if you must ask me.
Well, so thank you for that update, Mr. Alphonse from you. And we move over to the southeast region to speak with Chinagorom, who is our reporter there on the ground. Good morning, Chinagorom. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Chinagorom? Your microphone. Can you hear me now? Oh,
So
apparently we lost Chinagorom. We'll move over to the northwest. To speak with Babangida Mohammed, our reporter who is in Katsina. Can you hear me?
yeah, good afternoon, Chiamaka. I can hear you.
Babangida, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Good afternoon, Chiamaka. How are you doing? Here, Chiamaka. Good afternoon. How are you doing? Oh my God.
Babangida, can you hear me? Good morning.
Good afternoon. How are you doing, Chiamaka? I can hear you.
Good morning. I think mornings are my best times of the day. So good afternoon again, Babangida.
You've been saying good morning. It is afternoon here. 28 minutes past 12. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Babangida. What's going on? You're in Katsina, yeah?
Yes, I am in Katsina State.
What's happening? How do people in Katsina feel about the postponement of the gubernatorial election?
Well, it is a mixed reaction. Just as Mr. Plato said, first of all, there is a belief in some quarters that money will be in circulation once elections are done. So, since yesterday in the night, I've spoken with some people who expressed displeasure over the postponement of the election. Some people are even saying that, the postponement is to give an upper hand to the ruling party, alleging that the ruling party is not ready for the election, so they need more time to prepare. But the displeasure is due to the absence or lack of money in circulation, that is cash. 3 people I've spoken to yesterday said they believe that when elections are done, money will be in full circulation because the belief is that politicians are being given the money instead of the public. And then, there are other people that are happy because I've gotten people that are happy too. Once it is during politicking, that is campaigning, there are activities that bring money, especially to some segment of the society. Transporters, their vehicles are being hired because as I was returning home, I saw a campaign trail of PDP going to Mani local government. Mani local government is a very complicated area. They went there twice. They are returning today. In fact, they have gone. So some people are happy because it means more business with this postponement. And I think some of the candidates, because I've spoken with the spokesman of the PDP gubernatorial candidate, he said they welcome the postponement because it will give them more time. Because after the presidential election, the PDP in Katsina got a boost, honestly speaking, because they performed wonderfully. Atiku won Kaduna. So the result has emboldened them, and they said that this postponement will give them more time to look at where the areas they need to do more, especially in the campaign. So it's a sort of a mixed reactions, actually.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Babangida. I think to ask you, what do you think? So you just mentioned that Atiku Abubakar won Katsina, and what effect do you think the presidential elections will have on Cuba next week?
Well, it will definitely have an impact because before the election, with President Muhammad Buhari coming from Katsina, the influence of Governor Aminu Bello Masari and Minister of Aviation Hadis Rika, the belief was that Tinubu will win Katsina with a wide margin. Nobody saw Atiku winning Katsina, honestly speaking. But with this, because the areas that voted for Atiku, all the mandatory ravage areas voted for Atiku, and then Katsina Metropolis. In the Metropolis, Atiku got 45,000 votes. He won Katsina with a very wide margin. So this has given PDP hope that they may do magic. In fact, not magic, because they also won 4 House of Representative seats. Before, it used to be APC from top to bottom, if I can borrow Baba's lingua. So you see, this election has given them hope that they may even end up winning the presidential election, the gubernatorial election. And to be honest with you, the APC is jittery. After the election, we saw commissioners, permanent secretaries, and what have you being dismissed because the governor or the state government believe that those guys played a role in seeing that Atiku emerge. So this has given them hope. 3 more House of Representative members, incumbents, have also joined PDP. So I think this will have impact on the gubernatorial election, definitely.
Thank you very much, Babangida, for bringing us that way for Katsina. For me, I think this will be one of the most interesting times of our democracy as a country and as a people. And of course, we know that by next week, by Saturday, of course, we get to see different people emerging and getting on different positions and seats at both the state and federal levels. We'll go on a quick break now, and when we return, we'll be joined by GT Oguye, who's a public interest lawyer, to discuss the several grounds of opposition political parties and, of course, the possible verdict of the election tribunal. Stay tuned.
Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom. Women participation. Fact-checking. Discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more. Live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom. Women participation. Fact-checking. Discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more. Live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom. Women participation. Fact-checking. Discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more. Live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom. Women participation. Fact-checking. Discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more. Live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom. Women participation. Fact-checking. Discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more. Live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom. Women participation. Fact-checking. Discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more. Live on Premium Times. Stay connected.
You just joined us. This is Premium Times Elections Live update, and we are speaking with our reporters who are on field and they're part of the last presidential elections to bring us up to date on what's happening in their various regions. And we want to go back to Mariam. Mariam, can you hear me?
Hello,
Hi,
can you hear
Mariam.
me?
Good afternoon. Yes, I can hear you.
Good
Can you
afternoon.
quick 2 minutes bring us up to speed on what the participation of women was like at the last presidential elections at National Assembly was?
Okay, good afternoon. I was in Lagos. I was posted to Lagos for the election monitoring, and then surprisingly, I would say women came out, and particularly senior citizens. I saw so many women due to the fact that there were cases of low voter turnout and some of the polling units. You see polling units with 1,000 registered voters, and then you'll be seeing less than 50% coming out. But then I see women come out, which is really impressive. But they had issues with registration in the sense that some women came to a particular polling unit. I remember, and when they got there, they did not get to see their name on the list, and then they had to start looking for somebody to explain to them on where to, go exercise their franchise. So women participation in some of the polling units were really, and then I also saw situations where some polling units had to they got delayed by some INEC officials. The presiding officers did not even show up. As of 9, some of them were still waiting, and most of these people were women. They were women. So INEC has actually released the results of the presidential elections, but they are yet to give us like a breakdown of the number of voters to know whether we have more men than women. But from the polling units that I monitored, I saw women come out, which is really really impressive.
Interesting, Maria. So, what can you say also about young people and persons living with disability who are part of the process?
I would say that people with disability, I only encountered just one person, and that was on the highland, around the governor's polling unit. So it was just one person, and then it was easy. They had just smooth access to the polling unit. There was no stairs, so they exercised the franchise and they left. It was just one person who was accompanied by, I think, his mother. Yeah, so it was kind of crippled, and then they came in and he exercised his franchise. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mariam. That was Mariam Iliyemi from Lagos talking about women's participation in the voting process. I will quickly move over to Chinagoram Ugu, who is reporting from the southeast part of the country. Good afternoon again, Chinagoram. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning.
It's afternoon.
Oh, sorry, good
Yeah.
afternoon.
How has it been? What's going on? What part of the southeast are you in?
Come again, please.
What part of the southeast are you in?
Enugu precisely.
How's it going? What's the pulse of the people in Enugu?
Come again, please.
Chinagoram, can you hear me?
Hello. I can hear you loud and clear. I can hear you
Okay.
loud and clear.
Pulse of the people in Enugu State.
Your question is not clear. Please come again.
The pulse of the people in Enugu.
The what of people?
Chinamaru, can you exit and join us again? Sorry, we lost Chinamaru there, but quickly bring us up to speed on what's happening in Enugu State when he joins us again. We have with us GT Ogunye, who is the public interest lawyer, who is joining us to discuss issues around the elections, of course, grouses of various opposition parties who have, of course, gone to court and will be contesting the outcome of presidential and national assembly elections in the coming weeks. Good morning. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Okay. Yes.
I'd like to start by asking what your thoughts are on the postponement of the gubernatorial elections just last night, and if there are any legal implications, for the transition.
Well, election is very important to a democratic process. Periodic elections are the mechanism through which a government is formed in the executive branch of government and the legislative arm of government, the representative democracy. And so, since those who are elected into in the executive branch of government and in the legislature are supposed to be representative of the people, the mechanism through the emerge must guarantee that those who emerged are claiming to have the mandate of the people to govern truly are the representative of the people. So the sanctity of electoral choice is very
Mr.
important.
Oguye, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but it's breaking.
Okay, well, maybe that's a network problem.
Yeah.
I was saying that the sanctity of election through which the representative of the people emerge is very important. The process must be credible, it must be free and fair to ensure that those who emerge have the legitimacy of the people to govern. So we cannot worry enough about having an exercise that is adjudged credible free and fair. In other older democracies, particularly in the Western world, people still worry about elections. And we don't need to go too far. The last election in the United States threw up a number of issues, threw up unprecedentedly cases in court. The president that was defeated refused to accept that he was defeated, and I'm referencing what happened in the United States. Trump, and he was challenging the outcome of the elections on a state-by-state basis and all that. And so, even before that time, in certain constituencies, people worry about gerrymandering, about manipulation of the districts, how people vote, and who is qualified to vote, and those conditions that were stipulated to make people vote. To such an extent that people were arguing that voters were being suppressed and that voters were being disenfranchised, particularly in poor and black communities. I mean, they have their issues there. I reference that point to say that we must have a long-term view about the project of ensuring that we have the fairest and the freest election and the most credible results, most credible exercise that we wish to have. In other words, it's not going to be a 100 meters dash. It's going to be a marathon. And I'm not saying this to encourage fatalism, to say that, yes, we can't do anything about it. It must continue like this. No. I just want Nigerians to know that this process is something that we have to continue to work on, because at the heart of a democratic election is power struggle. That's what it is. It's power struggle. People may not be carrying arms or weapons, and indeed they carry arms and weapons, as we know now. We may not be talking about guerrilla struggle. We may not be talking about war to capture power. We may not be talking about a military coup, but it is still a power struggle. And once there is power struggle, there will be scoundrels who want to obtain power illegitimately. What the law does is to check them. And what government does is to keep them at bay, so that, and in addition, the people, the masses of what they should do is to ensure that those who want to use force, illegitimacy to contaminate the process and have their way, do not have their way. So we must take that realistic view. That said, in other words, we must realize that, look, right from the independence election of 1959 to the first general election after the independence election of 1959, in 1964 to the Western general election of 1965, we led to Operation Wet here in Western Nigeria and set the stage for the January 15 coup, to the 1979 election, to the 1983 election, shortly after which the military came to power again, to the 1999 election, 2003, 2007, 2011, and 2015, 2019, and now 2024. It is evident that players, just some players want to use hook or crook to get political power. So we must take the realistic view, therefore, that it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress, and we must continue to work hard at it. But specifically, in relation to the just concluded um, uh, February 26th election, my view is that the election is problematic. It's very challenging to INEC, which have received humongous and are promised many times that the election will be well conducted, over-promised, some people will allege, but which at the end of the day, was attended by glitches and problems and brigandage in some parts, violence in some other parts, to such an extent that given the promise that had been made and the expectation people had developed over that promise, many observers and many Nigerians couldn't, come out and say, oh, this outcome or this conduct, we can leave the outcome for a moment, this conduct was in sync, was in tandem with what they had expected. So the expectations of the people largely were cut short to that extent. But let me say, and I'm putting this on record, that my observation is that, and this is something I know, people will talk about a lot. My observation as a non-partisan in the election is that perhaps in the fullness of time, it will be recognized that this last election, worst and all, with all the criticism and all the objections, the hue and cry, with all the disappointments, may yet pass as the best conducted election since 1999. And the data are there to be reviewed. Since 1999, what we've had, or from 1999, what we've had, because technology was not so much present when we set out in 1999, was a litany of stories that racked the soul. Ballot boxes being snatched recklessly, ballot boxes being stopped with votes, multiple thumb printing, large-scale violence, and then manipulation of results, writing results in houses of party people, and then substituting the results obtained at the polling unit with the results so written and all that. Large-scale fraud and illicit behavior. But
So I'll quickly want to cut in there, Mr. Oguye, to say that, so 2 points there. The last elections, last presidential elections for you will go down as the best so far in our recent history since 1999. And I would love for you to elaborate on that. But before we move on to that, I really want to bring you back to the first question I asked on, the legality, if there are legal questions around the postponement of the gubernatorial elections, and also how that, feeds into the larger transition calendar. So if you could quickly respond to the question on, the postponement, and if there are legal questions around the postponement and how it fits into the general transition calendar first, and then we can talk about what you mean by, the last elections could go down for you as the best so far. Of course, a lot of Nigerians will contest that, but this is for you to elaborate and explain to us why you think that is. And on that, I also want to say that the NBA put out a report, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, albeit minimized, there was still vote buying and other irregularities that characterized previous elections.
well, I could hardly hear you because the line was breaking.
Okay, I can repeat myself again. Do you want me to go back again?
Yes, yes, I will appreciate that. Yeah.
Question. I want you to speak to the legal questions. Are there legal questions around the postponement of the gubernatorial elections, and how does it fit into the larger transition calendar?
Well, quickly on that, of course, there are legal issues, but these legal issues are not irresolvable. Under the Electoral Act, INEC has powers to postpone the conduct of election. Nobody is contesting that power. Now, INEC has issued a statement detailing the reasons why it had to postpone. That the beavers will have to be reconfigured, and that given the time they obtain a variation order from the Court of Appeal to reconfigure, that they will not be ready. The process will not be ready. They will not. They wouldn't have completed the reconfiguring before the Saturday election, and so they wanted a situation in which they would be ready, and so they postponed the election by a week. The implication for me on our lives shouldn't be overlooked. Yes, we can talk about how this postponement has affected the electoral calendar and things that have to be done, which they drew up themselves. But first, let's even talk about the social implication. A lot of people, for example, those who want to conduct marriages on Saturday next, not this one, the one after this. And they were cocksure that election wasn't going to hold on that Saturday. But now suddenly, with all the arrangements, they will have to postpone it because of what had happened, and so on and so forth. So I would have wished that the date was not tampered with. The reason given by INEC for me was rational, but I would have wished that the date was not tampered because of the social implication. Now, how does this one fit into the larger electoral calendar? I believe that it can be accommodated. It can be accommodated. It will only postpone by a week the number of days, 21 days now, that is allotted to filing an election petition for anybody that may be dissatisfied with the outcome of the gubernatorial contest as it relates to him, or the House of Assembly election as it relates to him. And so, because the dates are already fixed, date for determining a petition, everything must be under 180 days. So, invariably, it will impact on those dates so that.
If you can hear me, Mr. Nguye, I can't hear you. Something is wrong with the audio from your end.
But I can hear you.
Yeah, I can read your lips saying you can hear me, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Can you speak?
Can you hear me now?
Wow, I can't hear you now, but I read your lips clearly. Do you want to? Can you unmute your mic?
Can you hear me now?
Wow. I'm not sure what that is, but could you rejoin us? I can't hear you.
Okay.
Could you leave and rejoin?
Okay, I will rejoin you. Yeah.
Okay, waiting. Yeah, so let's see, bring up Chinagoro and hear what he has to say from Enugu State. Hi, Chinagoro.
Good afternoon.
Can you
Good
hear
afternoon.
me?
I can hear you very loud and clear. I can hear you very loud and clear. Can hear very
Can you hear me, Chinagoro?
loud and clear. Good afternoon.
In my polling unit, it was smooth. There was no form of rancor. But then what we had as a result again is also that thing. In my polling unit, it was smooth. There was no form of rancor. But then what we had as a result again is also that thing. People were sober. People were in a morning mood, as if they were diseased. As if they were bereaved. Yes.
Why was it that people expected a different result?
The people came out to vote for a change, but what they saw as a result was really a different thing. Yes. So, in other words, people were sober.
People were disappointed.
Exactly, they were highly disappointed for the result of the election.
So, with the way INEC conducted the election, are you happy with it?
No, it was really a very flawed process. Yes, INEC were really.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is still Premier Times Election Special, and we have been speaking with GT Ogunye, a public interest lawyer, and he's been walking us through the legal frameworks around the past election or the upcoming elections. Good afternoon again, sir. Apologies for that glitch. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon.
Yes, I can hear you now, sir. Sorry about that. Sometimes we can't beat this thing. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So very, very quickly, we're running out of time, and I want you to quickly comment on the points you made about the last elections for you being the best so far in the recent history of Nigeria's democracy.
Okay. Now, I'll be brief on that, but let me just be emphatic that, from 1999, up to now, electoral jurisprudence or election petition determination jurisprudence has revealed a lot. The Supreme Court called the 2003 election a gungun of an election. That kind of election should not come the way of this country again. These are justices of the Supreme Court saying. But thereafter, we had the 2007 election and the 2011 election in which youth corpers were killed. Then we had the 2015 election in which the president conceded defeat, and God bless him, before the election was even called. We had the 2019 election, and now we had the 2024 presidential election. Now, in all these elections, from basic paperwork in 1999, where no technology in terms of voters' identification and voters' accreditation on the date of the election, in which all this were present, gradually we saw technology being introduced. We saw the card reader being introduced in 2011 and 2015, and now we have Beavers and we have IRF. Now, in the previous elections, you will see that incredible figures were attributed to parties and candidates in elections. certain states were notorious for posting very huge figures. Kano, Katsina, Borno, Kaduna, Rivers. I could recall in 2015 election, Rivers had about either 1.8 million votes or 2.2 million votes. Now, compare that to the current situation. Why is it the case that whereas the number of registered voters were lesser in the previous years than what we had now in this election, barring the issue of voters apathy and people not coming out and all that, the number of those who actually voted, was less than in the previous year when the number of registered voters were lesser than the registered voters we have now. So what's responsible for that? We don't need to go far in summarizing. It's beavers. Is the accreditation process. And beavers has become the Achilles heel of INEC right now because of the lack of contemporaneous uploading of results as they are emanating from the units, as promised in the guidelines, as promised by them. Because that's the bone of contention right now, that it was not contemporaneous, that's what was in at the Electoral Act. Yes, it's the Achilles heel of INEC right now, but believe you me, what has occurred is that Beavers has become the new gatekeeper, screening out, dubious persons who want to come and vote. Those who want to use the cards of people that do not belong to them, those who want to commit all sorts of electoral malfeasance just to bolster their chances. And so we have fewer and fewer, people, participating in the election because the beavers. And again, you then realize that those who will have taken for granted that since they are the one controlling their states, they've been controlling this state for years, they were going to win. The election results have not turned out so. The second point I want to make for those who may contest this point is that, look, if you're familiar with the electoral history of Nigeria and the electoral map of Nigeria, the truth remains that most unfortunately, ethnicity and religion still remain major drivers of electoral preferences, electoral choices. And so,
let me quickly come in there, Mr. Ogunye, to ask a question. Your comment leads me into the next question on the contentions around the INEC. And of course, INEC had promised and contained the electoral law that this result will be uploaded from the polling unit to the IREF in real time. And that, of course, is why most political parties are in court today. And I'm thinking that this will make a larger part of their argument in court on why the process should be described as not transparent enough, and a number of them have called for the cancellation. So my question there will be, what jamming prayers do you think that aggrieved parties have at the tribunals?
Well, we cannot play the court. What I think that they will need to do to have a fair chance, because election petition is what is called sui generis, is in a class of its own. The substantiality of the infractions of the provision of Electoral Act, non-compliance with the provision of the Electoral Act, they will have to demonstrate and establish it. That one, there are infractions, there are non-compliance, there is non-compliance, and that these infractions and non-compliance are so substantial as to have affected the outcome, and that But for these infractions and non-compliance, they will have emerged as the winner of the election, other than the person who had been declared by NEC as the winner. So it's a tough thing to allege, because they will have to establish the infraction, the non-compliance, the violation of the provision of the Electoral Act, fraud in the election that they would like to allege, polling booth by polling booth. It's tough. Polling booth by polling booth. It is tough. Some of the parties is alleged that they do not even have polling agents in all the polling stations. And the allegation will have to be demonstrated through their polling agent deposing to affidavit or written statement on oath and saying that, oh, at my polling unit, this is what happened. This is how it happened and all that. Because you don't make allegations broadly without substantiation. So it's tough. However, if they are able to demonstrate and establish before a tribunal that the non-uploading of the results in real time, contemporaneously with the conduct of the election, are giving room to manipulation of the result sheet from EC 8E that is being manipulated, and they are able to demonstrate it from the printout, from what they are inspecting right now. They may have a fair chance of success. But if they're not able to do that, it's tough. And that's why I always insist. Yes, the law court is there, the tribunal is there for those who are dissatisfied with the outcome of elections to ventilate their grievances. I am dismayed by what has now become a culture or tradition of our courts always determining ultimately who the winner of a presidential election is, or any election at any level. It would have been better for the election to be free and fair, and then parties, even if they are sole losers, will accept the outcome because it is credible, it is transparent, it is free and fair, and many people observers will adjudge it as such. Now, the recourse to election petition is what the rule of law prescribes. That possibility shouldn't be an encourager to INEC not to do its best in ensuring that the conductor, so if you are dissatisfied, go to court. No, because increasingly our judiciary is getting more and more involved in election petition determination. And it comes with a cost. The cost being that even after the judiciary has done its bit, the matter will not be free of continued disputation and contestation. For example, Imo State and in some other areas. So it is always better. And that's why I cite the 2015 example, as a reference point. President Goodluck Jonathan, and I think that with the passage of time now, people are realizing the huge sacrifice he made. First, in conceding defeat, and two, in not contesting the outcome of that election. That was state-manly. At that time, people just said, no, what is delivered, is not courageous, you have contested the election and all that and all that. And some people said that, no, he didn't have the strength to contest it because there were riggings and manipulation on all sides. No. For me, it's a huge sacrifice. And I'm not prescribing that those who are dissatisfied with this result should take that step. No. Because if they feel strongly about the outcome of the election, they have a right to challenge it. But I'm saying that I look forward to a day when election after election, our judiciary will not be called upon in many election cases to decide who actually won an election, at all the levels, so that it will be an exception, not a general rule. Yeah, people have talked about the United States. Before the auditing of what Trump did in inundating the court, Donald Trump, with cases in the last election, because he's a very truculent, a very cantankerous person, United States will not be having series of election petitions. The other one we had before that time was the Al Gore's petition against Bush, Gore and Bush, in which the Supreme Court intervened and said, stop the Florida recount, and said that Bush should just go ahead and all that. Al Gore disagreed, but he accepted, and since that time, he never contested the election again. He went and started talking about global warming, started talking about climate change and all that. That's his passion and all that. But here, election after election, lawyers will queue up, and in fact, they expect now lawyers are being celebrated as experts in election petition. These are not DT. If the democratic process is working smoothly, the election process is working smoothly, you shouldn't be having that. So books are being published, case law is being published on election petition, something that should be an exception, but now it's become the rule. I look forward to a day when election will be so free and fair and credible that people will really have recourse to the judiciary to look into it. That's my wish. That's my prayer.
Yeah, and so we're running out of time, but a few last questions for you will be to ask you what, in your estimation, as a lawyer and someone who has been on that table as well, what in your estimation will constitute a case for any of the parties at the tribunal? And also, at what point do you think, what kind of case would the parties come to the court with or to the tribunal with that would warrant the judge, of course, to say, oh, we are canceling or granting your prayers, requesting us to cancel the election?
In 2007, this is the answer to your question. In 2007, President Umaru Yar'Adua came out openly and said, I acknowledge that the election that brought me to office is problematic. I acknowledge that there were widespread irregularity attending that election. Okay? There was an election petition, Buhari and Yar'Adua. And the Court of Appeal had a split decision in that election petition, on that election petition. Some avoided the election, some judges of the Court of Appeal, sitting as the election petition tribunal in the presidential election now. So that's the Court of Appeal that sits first. Didn't void the election petition. And so the appeal went to the Supreme Court. I wrote an article at that stage when the Court of Appeal ruled in that split decision. And that article, I remember now, was headed, will the court ever void the outcome of a presidential election in Nigeria? I reviewed the case law available, including Awolowo and Shagari in 1979, and I posited there that it's a very difficult task. It's very difficult because of the implication. It's not that they can't do it. They've done it at the level of the governorship. But the sheer size of the country will make such a possibility very rare. I've told you that in an election petition, if you are alleging fraud, thereby imputing commission of a crime, you will have to plead specially those facts that constitute the fraud, and you will have to argue them so specially. So the particulars of the fraud will be furnished and evidence will be provided. For example, in this last election, if you are able to prove, for example, if the party submit a petition is able to prove what happened in Lagos, the woman that was injured in that polling unit. That will not mean that will be taken as an example of what happened in that ward. Not to talk about that local government, not to talk about the state as a whole. You will have to prove it polling unit by polling unit all over the country, 176,000 or thereabout. So how are you going to do it? How many months would that take to prove it? Okay, so that you can then demonstrate how substantial that is as to persuade the court to overturn the results. When the law is that once there is substantial compliance, and this is the language of the Electoral Act, once there is substantial compliance, the court should not disturb it. So I expect those who are contesting this election, the results, to do their best. There are lawyers who are adroit, who have gained expertise in election petition handling. They will know what to do. And the courts, I believe that the courts will also do justice to parties in the circumstances, so that at the end of the day, the rule of law will have been vindicated. That's all I have to say in response to that.
Yeah, so to wrap up would be to ask you, at what point do you think the independence of the judiciary is questioned in all of this back and forth and the constant, petitions and election tribunal and obtaining of, mandates in quotes for different people? At what point does this bring to question the independence of the judiciary?
Now, going by history, there have been instances in which there was judicial compromise. In 2004, two justices of the Court of Appeal in Enugu Division, sitting as Election Appeal Tribunal on the Akwa Ibom State governorship election, two justices of the Court of Appeal were dismissed from the bench. Many people don't know this, by the judiciary itself, that felt that they compromised. In one instance, the orderly of the judge, of the justice of that court, gave evidence that money were packed in Ghana must go for the judge, and he was the one who took the money to the residence of the judge and all that. So it was very sad. And you know that the Osun election tribunal in the past also led to a judge being dismissed from the bench, led to a lawyer being sanctioned. It was a senior advocate of Nigeria. It was stripped of his sanctionship and so on and so forth. So we've had those examples. So I know that there are possibility to compromise the judiciary and undermine it. Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yes, we lost you for a moment. So could you please wrap up the talk about?
Okay. Yes. If you can hear me now, I will say that.
I can.
Okay, I'm saying that there are instances in the past when the judiciary had been in bad light. I talked about the Akwa Ibom election petition appeal involving two judges of the Court of Appeal that were dismissed that year. I referenced the Osun State Tribunal. So we must take it that politicians, who did so many terrible things in order to win elections will also attempt to do more in order to compromise the judiciary. However, I think that the judiciary is on the spotlight now, and I know that they know that the Nigerian public, the international community, will be looking at
Mr.
them.
Aguye, we lost you again.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
If you can.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, sir.
Okay, yes. Let me just quickly round up. I'm saying that the judiciary will realize that is aware that the Nigerian public, the international community, is looking at it uh, uh, carefully, and everything that the court does, the tribunal does on these election petitions will be the subject of public scrutiny. And so I'm hopeful that the judiciary will do its best in handling these election petitions. It's always a difficult thing for the judiciary because judges are expected to be above board like sisters' wives, but they are also part of the Nigerian situation. They may have political preferences and biases or choice. Yes, that's understandable. But as judges, they are expected to be neutral and be even-handed and do justice according to law. And so that's all that we're expected of them to do, and that they should do it with integrity. It should not be said that, oh, INEC had not performed as expected. Oh, the judiciary too has not performed as expected. The judiciary should come forward and be seen as a saving grace. And I am hopeful that the judiciary will be able to do its best in the circumstances.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ogunye, for
Okay.
joining us this afternoon
Okay.
today.
Thank you. Yeah.
We have been speaking with Mr. JT Ogunye, who is a public interest lawyer, and of course, over the years, done this job so well. And like he said, judiciary is really the last hope of the common man, and we hope that in the end, justice will be seen to be done to the various parties who have approached the courts, questioning, of course, and asking different questions of the last elections that was concluded last Saturday, 20th of February. We'll take a quick break now, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Roxanne and Stephanie, who will be speaking to the issues of press freedom violation in the last election. Welcome back. This is the Premium Times Elections update. My name is Chamaka Okapo, and I have in the studio with me this afternoon Jonathan Rockland of Committee to Protect Journalists, CPJ, right?
That's right.
Hi, Jonathan. Thank you for joining us. And we're going to be talking about our press freedom in Nigerian elections. It's been a trend. And I like that I have your table the trend to me and the numbers of what they see because this is the bulk of what CPG does around protection of journalism. Well, the kind of violation and challenges they face in the course of their job. And I know you were here in Nigeria in the last 2 weeks, so we had the presidential election. And you must have recorded stuff. At the top of my head, I know of Harry now, who he times was arrested about this. And I'm sure you have a list of this for other people. But let's establish context before we move into the numbers. What has been CPJ's general overview around press freedom in Nigeria and also putting context elections?
Yeah, I mean, the Committee to Protect Journalists has been tracking press freedom in Nigeria for years. And unfortunately, there are a number of issues that have come up time and again, notably behavior of security forces. Journalists are frequently attacked or face interference from security forces. And there's very little accountability when those incidents take place. That's one. Additionally, there's legislation. There are laws that are repeatedly used to criminalize journalism in Nigeria. You think of the criminal defamation, you think of the Cybercrime Act, even anti-terrorism legislation has been used to criminalize journalism here and to arrest and prosecute journalists. We also look at concerns around surveillance, telecom surveillance, the seizure of phones by security forces. These are all things that journalists consistently have to deal with in Nigeria, and there are things that we've consistently been drawing attention to. When we look at elections, elections are moments of political tension. There are moments when information is particularly valuable to the public, and unfortunately, including this year, we've seen journalists harassed and attacked and in certain cases detained as they try to bring the news on the elections to the public.
And so it's a trend. I agree with you because I'm a journalist myself, and of course I've had to I've been caught in crossfire when I use that expression, and I know I can imagine what colleagues would have gone through in the last elections. And again, I repeat the case of Haruna because that was one that was so in my face. And I don't know what the update is yet, but as of last week, he was still in detention in Bauchi State. So speak to me with numbers now. What did you record in the last elections as for violation of the rights of journalists and all of this harassment journalists?
Yeah, just circling back on Haruna's case, Haruna Mohammed Salisu was detained. He was a journalist who was detained covering the election on the 25th. He was held for several days and he's actually been released on bail. But he'll be back in court facing a charge of inciting the public against the governor on March 13th. So that's the update on his case. But he was just one of 14 journalists who we reported being either harassed, detained, or attacked as they covered the elections.
Interesting. And among those 14 journalists, have there been any who have consistently? So there's one part of it is to be detained and then granted bail and having to return to court in the case of Haruna. And to ask quickly on that way today, are there others who have similar issues like Haruna? And if there are none like that, are there people who have cases of consistent threats coming their way and their family? So this feeling of not being safe where and having to flee.
Yeah, when we look at the 14 journalists who faced interference on election day, Haruna is the only one that's facing prosecution. That's not to say that the effect of those incidents isn't significant and it doesn't have ripple effects. We know that when journalists face interference, we know that when journalists face attack, the effect of that lingers. We also know that in certain instances during this election, journalists had content from their devices deleted by security forces and by political supporters. And so, of course, the loss of that content, the loss of that information ripples forward. And ultimately, it's about the fact that the public was denied information about the election. When journalists are denied access to report on the democratic process, it's the public and the world at large that suffers from not knowing what's going on in a moment of such significance and of such importance for Nigeria.
So Section 22 of the Nigerian Constitution empowers the media to hold government to account. And then, of course, there's the human rights, which allows all of us to have a freedom of expression. And Nigeria willingly signed all of these treaties. And now we see Nigeria violating this. Is there a point where you think the international community can raise questions on, violation of treaties you signed onto? And I think at the top of my head would be the Vienna Convention on Treaty of Law of Treaties, which says that countries would not, on terms of their own law, violate certain treaties they signed up to. So, is there the place for international community? And I'm asking this because CPJ cuts across different parts of the world. It's not just in Nigeria or Africa, but why in the Americas and Europe and all parts of the world. Is there a point where the international community can come together to raise questions around harassment of journalists, not just in Nigeria, but in other parts of the world too?
Certainly, the Committee to Protect Journalists is a global organization. Myself and our other staff around the world are consistently reporting on incidents anywhere they happen, really, and advocating not only with local governments, with national governments, but also with international institutions to call for an improvement of conditions for journalists everywhere. Really, again, it comes down to a matter of public information. When journalists aren't free to
What can journalists do better to protect themselves in terms of keeping safe and being proactive when they use that term in line of duty?
Yeah, it's a very good question. My colleague, Evelyn Okaki, and I spoke to over 50 journalists and members of civil society ahead of the Nigerian elections and asked them what tips they had for their colleagues as they went to cover the elections this year. And they gave us a range of answers. But really one of the response that came back time and again was knowing the local context. The security situation across Nigeria is very diverse. Parts of the country face very unique security challenges, and so covering those areas during the election was going to pose very unique security challenges. So journalists told us that they hope their colleagues would do research on the locations that they were going to go if they weren't familiar with them, and be sure that they had maybe a local reference point to give them advice on where to go and where not to go. I mean, there were certainly cases where editors said that they would not be sending journalists to certain areas, or they would be relying on local freelancers to make sure that that local context came both into the reporting to ensure that it was as accurate as possible, but also so that the journalists doing that reporting could stay safe. Then there were other tips, really practical stuff like having an extra phone battery, making sure that you were aware of which service provider was the most effective in a given area, making sure that one of your colleagues knew where you were going to be, and maybe having a check-in throughout the day to make sure that if anything went wrong, someone would be notified quickly, using a driver that knew the area very well. These are all very practical tips that journalists shared with us to help their colleagues stay safe covering the elections.
Thank you very much. I'm going to put you there and we want to Stephanie Adams Douglas, who's joining us on the line. Stephanie is the Deputy Manager of the Press Bureau Program at Center for Journalism and Development. And she has worked on this for quite some time now and also has a press attack tracker, which tracks the attack of journalists across the country. Stephanie, if you can hear me, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Maka.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon to speak to me about the realities journalists face in the country in terms of press freedom and also is tied to the next elections, the coming elections, of course, the gubernatorial elections. And so I'll rephrase that again to say, speak to me about press freedom in Nigeria, what you saw in the last election, the presidential election, and what you think might be, what your projections are going into the next election.
Over the years, there's been a lot of attacks and harassment on journalists in Nigeria, and it's not peculiar to Nigeria, but in Nigeria it comes with a lot of dynamics. And in the past few weeks, we have seen where journalists have been attacked and harassed, mostly by security actors, and at the same time by I'll call them, political thugs or fans of people in positions of power. And this is not in any way new, actually. There has never been an election without an attack on journalists, considering that these are some of the major people who hold the people accountable. And considering that this is the 7th democratic election that is happening in Nigeria, this wasn't in any way different. The election that happened on the 25th was not in any way different. We've seen where journalists were attacked, detained for days without any form of charges, which is illegal, and it's even more embarrassing that actually happened, or that was instructed by someone in position of power. We've seen where journalists were attacked by political talks just because they were recording irregularities during the election. So every day journalists face one type of attack and harassment to the other in the 6 geopolitical zones. Most of the time we get to record those that are willing to speak. Most of the time we're able to verify attacks from people who are willing to speak, from media organizations who are willing to speak. But in most cases, journalists are not willing to speak. We've seen cases where journalists are attacked and we reach out to them and they'll be like, no, they literally don't want to talk about this, or they don't want to take any form of, they don't want to make any form of charges. So these things just happen every day, and it comes in different dynamics. The current elections we've seen where, interestingly, we did not record any attack or harassment on journalists by any sect during the presidential election this year, which is different from what we experienced in 2019 and 2015. So this particular presidential election, we did not record any attack on a journalist by a sect, either Boko Haram, either the indigenous people of Biafra, and other groups, which is one thing that before the election we were really concerned about, because a lot of times harassment, these journalists have been harassed by this group. So we were there was a whole lot of there was a whole lot of tension around how journalists may be attacked by this sect, but we were unable to, or we did not record any attacks so far. So yes, the president. Can you hear me, Amaka?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So the presidential election did not in any way go different from what we have been recording over the years. The only difference is this time around, we have been able to record a few number of attacks. That does not mean we should not speak about attacks and harassment on journalists. Compared to 2019, we recorded about 32 attacks on journalists during the presidential elections. But for the elections that happened on the 25th of February 2023, we were only able to record and verify 13 attacks from the press attack tracker. I know working with Jonathan and CPJ, they've been able to confirm and verify 14 attacks, but on our own end, we haven't verified the number that makes it 14 yet. So we're still working on that. And we believe and hope that in the coming elections, we record a lesser number of attacks, if possible, no attacks at all. Over to you, Amaka.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And just to stay on you and quickly to ask what you think the Nigerian government can do better in terms of protecting journalists in line of duty, because of course we are the fourth estate of the realm and we need to protect as much as every member of society. So what do you think the government can do there?
The irony of this case is that most of the attacks are done by the security personnel or security personnel who are supposed to be protecting these journalists. So the government can do better in the first place by implementing, sorry, I'm getting feedback, so it's a little bit distracting. But first, the government can start by at least implementing a policy, a national policy for safeguarding the press and safeguarding journalists. In doing that, it simply means that we will be holding everyone accountable. Any attack and harassment on journalists will be held accountable. I mean, since the days of Delegiwa, there's been lots of, and even before Delegiwa, there's been lots of attacks and harassment on journalists. But till date, nobody has been held accountable. So the level of impunity is getting really, really high. The government can do better by at least, ensuring that that national policy is in place and then perpetrators are being held accountable. I mean, we've seen where the governor of Bauchi State held Haruna Mohammed for 3 days without charges, and that is absolutely illegal and nobody is holding him accountable. I remember when the Coalition for Whistleblowers Protection, the CPJ, and so many other media organizations started to rally, calling out the governor, sending out press statements, calling out, the police in Bauchi State. It was after people started to react, after media workers coalition started to react, that Haruna got released on the third day. Now, in a situation like this, the governor should not just be, he shouldn't just go scot-free. He should at least explain why he held somebody, a journalist, in the line of duty for 3 days without any charges. It is absolutely illegal. Once we begin to hold people in positions of power accountable, then there's going to be a structure where people know that the fourth estate of the realm should not be tampered with, especially because they hold the people accountable. And by the way, I always say this, that in Nigeria, the fourth estate of the realm is actually one of the most important because they do their job in putting out the information out there. That is their job. They gather the information and put it out there. For most of the corruption cases, Nigerians wouldn't have known if not for journalists. For most of irregularities, Nigerians would not know if not for journalists. So why hold these people? Why hold these people? Why attack these people? Why harass these people why even, kill? Because some people have disappeared and we still have not heard about them. We don't know where they are. So we cannot even put a tag on them if they're alive or not, So these are the issues around the state of press freedom in Nigeria. And until someone is held accountable, until people are held accountable, then the level of impunity will continue to skyrocket. Over to you, Amaka.
Thank you very much, Stephanie and Douglas, for that quick update from the Media Freedom Project of the Center for Journalism, Innovation and Development. And we're back here in the studio with Jonathan to ask you to give your big final comments on the issues of the press freedom and protection of journalists and also the Nigerian landscape.
Sure, yeah, just echoing what Stephanie said, accountability in these incidents is key. Journalists tell us time and again that accountability would signal political will from authorities that these issues matter, that their safety matters, and that would also act as a deterrent for future behavior, particularly by security forces, who of course have a mandate to protect the Nigerian public and of course including journalists. There's going to be a new government in Nigeria. This is a huge opportunity for there to be reform of legislation, to remove criminal defamation, bring Nigeria's laws in line with freedom of expression standards internationally, to reform the Cybercrime Act, particularly Section 24, which is being used to prosecute journalists, and to commit to proactive legislation, to proactive commitments to press freedom. As Stephanie said, there was a Digital Rights and Freedoms Bill that was before the government that didn't go anywhere. There are opportunities not only for Nigeria to change the laws that it has on the books to ensure the safety of journalists, but also to be a leader on this in the region and globally.
Thank you very much, Jonathan Roxanne of CPJ. And this is where we wrap up for this episode of the Elections of Media Freedom in Nigeria. And we'll take a big break. When we return, we'll be joined by Nigeria's diaspora to get a view of their agenda setting role for the new government. Stay tuned.
Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom. Women participation. Fact-checking. Discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more. Live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom. Women participation. Fact-checking. Discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more. Live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom. Women participation. Fact-checking. Discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more. Live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom. Women participation. Fact-checking. Discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more. Live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom. Women participation. Fact-checking. Discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more. Live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom. Women participation. Fact-checking. Discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more. Live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom. Women participation. Fact-checking. Discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more. Live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election. Press freedom. Women participation. Fact-checking. Discussion on the forthcoming governorship election and more. Live on Premium Times. Stay connected. Premium Times Election Special. Comprehensive review of the just concluded presidential election.
Welcome back. This is the Korean Times Election Special. My name is Chiamaka Okafor, and we have been speaking with a couple of guests to discuss on with the press freedom agenda and, of course, the challenges Nigerian journalists face in line of their duty. And we will be joined by Nigerians in the diaspora. We'll be joined by Mercy Abba and Nika Tella, who are both Nigerians in the diaspora and, have, of course, have monitored closely and followed the last elections. And we'll be talking about the agenda setting role of Nigerians in diaspora can set for the incoming government. And quickly over to Bessie and Inka on the call. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Ms. Aban. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good afternoon, Chamaka. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon, Mr. Taylor. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good afternoon, Chiamaka. How are you?
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon to talk about the diaspora agenda for the new government. And I quickly just want to get a feel your pulse on your thoughts of the last elections. And I'll start with Ms. Aban.
I think that's an interesting question because I don't know where to start from. Personally, I must say that I'll start by saying Happy International Women's Day to all the women across the world. The fact that Nigeria recorded almost at best 3% representation in parliament during the last election at the National Assembly is disappointing. The elections, we're grateful that the level of violence, even though there was skirmishes here and there, it wasn't as much as some of the elections we've experienced before in the country, which was a good thing. However, there are concerns about the legitimacy of that process because of how, there were voter suppression in certain parts of the country and, widespread reported, rigging in a way that certain results that, you can see that, the IRF couldn't take in results and people could not download. I mean, there were lots of concerns around that process, and it's the burden is on the Independent National Electoral Commission. That's pretty much my take, and I hope that INEC fixes itself up because you cannot, in all honesty, spend about 300 billion and not at least get the very basics right. It sort of feels like we're always having the same problems each election season, right? There's concern about late arrival of voter material. Some polling units were receiving materials at as late as 12 noon. Some got materials as late as 1 p.m. These are the things that you had expected us to have moved far way beyond in our electoral experience, but we're still experiencing it, and you can see that there are concerns around disenfranchising a whole population of people that wake up to go and cast their ballot. Some people do not eventually get to cast their ballot that day because the presiding officer just decides to say, "Oh, it's already late. We cannot continue the process," and that's it. We shouldn't have that. Everybody should be able to go out and vote when they ought to vote. And I think that it's a bit disappointing, to say the least. And for me, what's personal for me is the fact that more women, especially seven senators and more women in the House of Representatives, are not returning back to the National Assembly, or at least new people are not going to the National Assembly in larger numbers, especially women. And for me, it calls for concern for us as a nation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abba, for letting us into your head and your heart of what you think about the just concluded presidential elections. And I'll quickly switch to Mr. Taylor to ask the same question. How do you perceive the just concluded elections? And I also know that the NIO had released a report, an interim report on the presidential elections. So speak to me about the contents of your report and how you feel generally about the process.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, Nigerians in Diaspora Organization worldwide, which consists of all the continents, actually was accredited to observe the elections. So we had our observers in Lagos, Ogun, Enugu, Plateau, Benue, Union Cross Rivers, Delta, Edo State, and the Federal Capital Territory. And what my sister, Ms. Ebang, has talked about, I would say those were some of the observations that actually contained in the reports that we submitted to INEC, that we also released to the public last week. The major problem when it comes to this enfranchisement is the late arrival of INEC officials at their various units, and also pockets of violence, which we did not observe directly, but which I know was really awash in the media in some areas of the country, which probably scared away some voters. But overall, what we realized was that this is one of the those elections that we can say INEC probably overpromised and underdelivered. So the problem is not so much, what they delivered, is the fact that there is a gap between what they promised and what they eventually delivered. Because I've been, I've been involved in, basically watching or monitoring elections in Nigeria since the 1990s. And I must say that for most of those elections, whether you are talking about the 2003 election or the 2007 elections, and so on and so forth, there's never a paper trail that will enable you to be able to actually interrogate the data later. Unlike what we have with this past election, where because of the introduction of beavers, it was possible to actually ensure that politicians don't just sit down in one place and write figures, because those figures had to be validated by beavers in terms of the number of accredited voters, and if the number of if those voted actually exceeded the number of accredited voters, then whatever is done in that particular polling unit will be invalidated. I think the problem that INEC had was that even though they were able to use beavers to ensure that only legitimate voters voted, they also put in their regulations, which we noted, that there was going to be instantaneous transmission of the results from the polling unit to IREV. Unfortunately, this was largely observed in the breach because the polling officials they said they experienced difficulty in actually transmitting those results directly onto IREF, especially when it came to the presidential ballot. And one of the things we realized is that the presidential ballot was being transmitted to a different server than the others. So maybe there was a technical glitch, like INEC told us or whatever, but the fact remains that INEC continued up to the very last moment to assure all stakeholders that those results would be transmitted to IREF. And that was the problem. That, and also the fact that the way they managed it. Now, if they were experiencing a glitch, as they made us to realize, I think it would have been nice if they had been proactive in communicating that to Nigerians, putting Nigerians to confidence. But they did that well after the time, by which time some of the stakeholders had lost their confidence in the process. Even though they all have results of the elections, they all had copies of the Form EC8A. Our observers who are on ground, they took snapshots of the Form E8CA, and you could actually go back to IREF to try and match whatever you have on your Form EC8A with what has been uploaded on the system. But I think everything is now before the judiciary, and we will see how that plays out.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Mr. Taylor. And like you said, it's now in the hands of the judiciary, and we hope that justice is seen to be done in the end. And quickly walk us back to the essence of this conversation, which is diaspora engagement for the new government. What are the possible kinds of engagement we want to see the new government bring on board, in terms of development? And this is especially important in the current dispensation we are. We hear words like Japa becoming household expressions for especially young people who want to leave the country for greener pastures because the country perhaps is not working for them or not giving them the kind of energy, to use Gen Z parlance, they need to survive and thrive in the environment. And I want to start by asking Ms. Aban, we spoke about women's participation and how women could be seen more in public life. What kind of partnership do you think the Nigerians in the diaspora, can strike with the new government in terms of bringing to the fore the need to mainstream women in public life and participation in government?
Thank you so much, Amaka. I think that the diaspora population, they are very important to the development, the overall development of Nigeria as a country. We can list certain countries that have matured or they're developed thankfully to their diaspora population. And Nigeria needs to start tapping into that, beyond the FDIs, between the formal and informal sector that is being sent. It has to be intentional in a way where there's a direct connect, between those in the diaspora and how they are able to support or and how they're able to galvanize young people or women to get into political offices. And beyond funding, I know that whenever we have diaspora conversations, the conversation is always funding, which is also good, right? And absolutely yes, those in the diaspora do have the capacity to fund, but they also do have the capacity to be able to organize in a way that that is helpful to the country and to us as well. Because when you go around, when you talk to a lot of people that are abroad, the feedback is always the same. Someone tells you, oh, if I know that I can be in Abuja, or I can stay in Lagos, I can stay in Enugu or in Zamfara or whatever, or in Sokoto, for instance, and I know that I am safe, I will go back home, right? That tells you something, that people that are in the diaspora love Nigeria, want to be part of the development kind of country. However, they are still concerned. So, but rather than continue in individualism, I hope that the new government in place can be very intentional in connecting all the missing dots with linking those in the diaspora and saying we have to work together. Or I mean, there are governments that have had to introduce things like a return home policy for their population. It must not be a return home. I always try to say that as well. We all must not stay in Nigeria. We all mustn't also stay abroad, right? But what we should prioritize is that we need a country that works for us. So that way, if Mr. A decides to stay back home, it's fine. If Mr. B decides to leave the country, it's also fine. But it shouldn't be because there is insecurity concerns, the lack of employment for young people. That's why people are leaving or migrating. If everybody leaves, who is going to fix the country? So in a way, to respond to your question, we cannot have a country, Nigeria, and and assume that the diaspora population has no role to play to wherever future we want our country to get to. It has to be part of it. It has to be an important and a critical part of it. Look at the Chinese diaspora population. They've been one of the most influential to their part of the world. And there are lots of countries like that where you can cite case studies, where there are lots of projects that have been handled by diaspora population because there's that direct connect, there's that direct, interface that happens. And I hope that that's being pushed properly. But finally, on the women conversation, I think that we need a lot of we need more organizing. We need more lobbying, I would say, because oftentimes people assume that power is something you can just get. You don't just get it, right? You need to learn to lobby. You need to learn to advocate. So from the APC to the PDP to perhaps the Labour parties, how are we being able to lobby the hierarchy of the party to say, you know what, if you're going to give 10 slots or 10 tickets to a particular geopolitical zone, make sure that 50% of that slot goes to women. We don't care how you do it. Just make sure women. So if we do it across political parties, so it doesn't become a situation where one party says, no, we cannot take the risk or we cannot do that. We need to be able to enforce it in a way that other countries have done it. Look at Rwanda. Rwanda is a very small country, but they've been able to achieve 60% female women representation in their parliament. And Nigeria is just it's 3%. Like, we should bury our heads in shame. It's embarrassing. So for me, I think that there should be that process of lobbying with the political structure, because the political structure in Nigeria has been wired in a way that works with the way it's working now, just so that representation is not there. I mean, this is 2023. Why are we still having a conversation about representation? It shouldn't be the conversation we should be having. We should be talking about men sitting down to make policies for the rest of the population, where there are women that also should be part of this policy making processes. So I think that we should learn to lobby beyond the criticism, beyond the activism, beyond the shouting. We should learn to lobby and organize properly. That's the way we can achieve. Because right now I am no longer talking about 35%, because it irks me when I hear people talk about 35%. 50%, 60% female representation. And we can achieve it. If we have a political will, again, now political will is not just those who are in government or who hold public offices. Everybody, those of us in the private sector, those of us in the public sector, to be able to push for that level of conversation to get to the fore.
Thank you very much. Just to piggyback off what Ms. Aban said, I would like to hear from Mr. Taylor. What are the major concerns you think you want as an organization, Nigeria in diaspora organization worldwide? What are the major concerns you think you can work with this government to address to make for a better country? If I may use that expression, I mean, Nigeria is great, so yeah, better.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chiamaka. I think we need inclusiveness, and one of the things that has really bothered Nigerians in diaspora organization over time is that Nigeria as a nation seems to be very happy when we send money back home, but when it comes to enfranchising us, recognizing our voice, giving us the right to suffrage, that becomes a problem. And there have been so many efforts to ensure that Nigerians in diaspora are able to vote, but for some reason, it always falls short. The last time that that happened, less than 1/3 of senators and House of Reps members actually voted for Nigerians in diaspora to be able to vote, in spite of the fact that the Independent National Electoral Commission was struggling in support of the move. So we need to make sure that we give the diasporans a voice in governance by making sure that they are able to vote. I mean, lesser African countries, smaller African countries, they're not necessarily lesser, are be able to empower their diaspora to vote, like Botswana, like Kenya. And with the advent of the NIN, the National Identification Number, I think that should be a no-brainer. So there's a need for us to ensure that when next Nigerians are voting, whether Nigerians are residents in Nigeria or they are residents abroad, we need to ensure that that is guaranteed. Nigerians in Diaspora Organization will be approaching the National Assembly to make sure that we take this to the finish line. Another area of concern for us is NITCOM. NITCOM is Nigerians in Diaspora Commission. It was actually initiated by NIDO, Nigeria, as like a clearinghouse for all things diaspora. And one of the things that was supposed to happen to NITCOM was that the board of NITCOM was supposed to be composed of leaders of the diaspora from all the continents. Up to now, that board has not been set up, and there is need for us to ensure that the diaspora is actually involved in the running of this body, because that way it will be easier for us to be able to identify talents in all spheres of the world. You can see that everywhere in the world, whether you are talking about the United States or Europe, Nigerians are always on top when it comes to their professions. They are recognized all over the world as being top-notch, when it comes to actually adding value to their societies. We are not happy just adding value to foreign countries and societies. We want to be able to add value in Nigeria, whether you are talking about in the space of ICT, whether you are talking about water resources, which is very interesting because in Nigeria, a lot of people still don't have access to potable water. Whether you are talking about healthcare services, education, just name it. We want to be able to, contribute in making sure that the quality of life for Nigerians is improved. And the only way to do that is to ensure that whatever talent we have outside of the country is also harnessed for the development of our nation. So those are some of our areas of concerns. We want to be able to contribute to nation building. We don't want to be seen as foreigners in our own land. So, government has to make sure that structures are put in place to guarantee that kind of inclusiveness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor. We've run out of time, unfortunately, but I quickly want to hear from the two of you, and I'll start with Ms. Abandi. What for you will make for the perfect or near perfect diaspora policy?
So that's it. I mean, I don't know where to start from, because sometimes I find myself trying to understand what is our foreign policy. So now breaking it down to diaspora policy, I have no idea, because oftentimes, like what the last speaker said, rightly pointed out, we failed woefully in being able to. I don't know if it is failure on our part or from the part of the government, or it's just something that we've not been intentional about in projecting the good that great Nigerians are doing. So in the country where I am now, if you hear the government talks about Nigeria, or if you hear Nigeria in the news, in a way, It's not a good thing. It's probably somebody who is in the prison. And one day I asked someone, I said, why do we talk about Nigerians who are defaulting? Why don't we talk about Nigerians who are doing great things in this space? So in a way, I feel like, yes, bad news sells. I mean, if you worked in the newsroom, they do, again, before the advent of solution journalism, of course, bad news is what is news. But I feel like as a nation or as a people, it's our task to be able to project what we're doing. Nigerians all over the world are doing a really, really great work. So if it's a policy in that regard, I would expect NIDCOM or the foreign ministry to be able to sit down with Nigerians in the diaspora and develop something that is really, really good in a way that projects the good work done by Nigerians. In some countries, you have to rely on Nigerian doctors for your survival. In other countries, for instance, in the country where I am, most of the young people that are into tech right now came from Nigeria, contributing to this country. And nobody gets to talk about that. These are not the conversations that gets to the news, but rather, when one person out of perhaps 8 million or 3 million people who are residents in this country beats the traffic light, that is the story that everybody gets to report. And that is the story that even we ourselves, and I'm not putting the blame on foreigners, we also get to highlight, forgetting that. So for me, the conversation around the policy would be that beyond projecting what Nigerians are doing right and the Nigerians that keep doing amazing work, is the same way nobody tells you that Manhattan is a dirty, smelling place. Nobody tells you that. If you watch the news, if you watch movies, the story you hear about Manhattan in New York is like you're in heaven. But you have to stay in Manhattan to know that no, it's not, right? Americans have perfected it. I'm not saying that we should completely send stories that are not correct. However, the negative is more. How then can we project ourselves, our country, in a way that helps us to also add more to the FDIs? Additionally, like what our former speaker said around money, beyond money, Nigerians should be able to vote. We should be able to go to the embassy when elections happen and also cast a ballot and also feel like we're part of what's going on in our country. And I hope that that's the kind of conversation the policy should have. But then, as a nation, we are yet to even clearly define what our foreign policy is. Because the last time I checked, the Nigerian foreign policy is about Africa first. Then I start wondering, what is Africa first? Because it's really big, So how can we break that down in a way that, as a Nigerian, I understand that my country prioritizes me, even if I'm not there, or my welfare or my well-being as a citizen of the country. So I think that needs to be spelled out clearly.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abang. Quickly to you, Mr. Taylor, what for you will make for a perfect or near perfect diaspora policy?
A Nigerian foreign policy, did you say?
A diaspora policy. This is this is a diaspora conversation. So
okay.
Policy for the diaspora.
Oh, okay. I think it all boils down to inclusiveness, and the NIDCOM, Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, they actually released a diaspora policy a couple of years ago. But the thing is, it's not just about putting things on paper. It's actually ensuring that there's no daylight between what we put on paper and what is implemented. My sister, Ms. Abang, was talking the other time about Ghana's return policy, not just for their citizens in the diaspora, but even for African Americans. We have to come up with a concept that ties Nigeria's fate not only to the fate of its diaspora in terms of ensuring that they are fully engaged in all the issues of governance, in all the issues concerning economic, sustainability, in all the issues concerning Millennium Development Goals, to ensure that we identify all the necessary talent and we make sure that they key in to be net contributors to the development of Nigeria, because Nigeria needs a lot of help, and our salvation should not lie in going to running, sometimes cap in hand to China alone. I'm not saying we should not have relationship with China. I'm not saying that we should not use some of the expertise, leverage on some of the expertise that they have. But I think we need to leverage more on the expertise that advanced within the Nigerian diaspora, because that expertise has Nigerian blood, is branded with Nigerian blood. That expertise is patriotic. That that expertise is invested in the Nigerian project. So we have to make sure that before we go cap in hands to China, to Asia, to Europe, that we first identify the talents that we have and we leverage on them. Also, one way that we can leverage on the Nigerian diaspora is we have a lot of very bright young people in Nigeria who have come up with all sorts of innovations. We need to find a way to match those innovations with willing investors within the Nigerian diaspora to commercialize those innovations. Every now and then, we see, on social media, on YouTube, on WhatsApp, stories of young, creative Nigerians who have, innovated one thing or the other. Like, so I think somebody came up with the idea of, being able to run an automobile without gas, and that was from Nigeria. So we should not just have a Ministry of Science and Technology that is thinking of maybe in 20 years' time we'll know how to manufacture toothpick. We need to have a Ministry of Science and Technology that is thinking big, thinking of how they can leverage on the imagination of Nigerians by matching them with capital that is available out there from the Nigerian diaspora. I want us to move beyond, just sending money to family members. I want us to find a way to pool our resources together to be able to ignite the productive capacity of Nigerian youth.
Thank you very much, Stella, for that contribution. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I'd have loved to stay longer to get perspective from the diaspora, but we have to run. Thank you very much, Mr. Abang and Nika Stella, for joining us this afternoon to have this conversation. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. There you had us, have a conversation with Mr. Abang and Nika Stella, who joined us from the diaspora, talking about the participation of diasporans in Nigeria, and of course, a new agenda for the new government in terms of diaspora engagement all over the country. Right now, we'll go on a quick break, and when we get back, we will be discussing a germane issue, which of course, Abang pointed out in her contribution, about women's participation in Nigerian politics as key nation builders and a majority of the voting bloc. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
In my polling unit, it was smooth. There was no form of rancor. But then what we had as a result again is also that time. People were sober. People were in a morning mood, as if they were diseased. As if they were bereaved. Yes.
Why was it that people expected a different result?
The people came out to vote for a change, but what they saw as a result was really a different thing. Yes. So, in other words, people were sober.
People were disappointed.
Exactly. They were highly disappointed for the result of the election.
So, with the way INEC conducted the election, are you happy with it?
No, it was really a very flawed process. Yes. In the INEC were really they were not, in other words, they couldn't follow what they have told us in earlier on, that they were up and doing for the task ahead. Really, yes. For what we saw, it showed that INEC were not, they weren't prepared for the election, or they were being so mischievous. Yes, about the whole thing.
So the Saturday election is coming up.
Yes.
Do you have hopes INEC will correct their?
I mean, if I'm to judge from what I saw from yes, with the last election, yeah, well, I cannot tell exactly what will be the outcome. If really all they have said that they were they are prepared for the election, and then it turned out to be a sham. So that, if we're to judge by that, that may really equally dovetail with what is forthcoming at the next day election.
So are you going to participate in forthcoming?
I may or may not. You understand? I have resolved not to even. I have resolved not to ever again get involved in the Nigerian election. Yes, I've resolved never to get myself involved.
Was it as a result of?
Yes. What happened? Yes, indeed. For 2 days I was down. I couldn't sleep, and then I couldn't sleep.
Thank you. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is still Premium Time Selections Update. And in this part of the show, I will be talking about women in Nigerian politics, women's participation in government. Women make up half of Nigeria's population. I don't have the right to this, of course, but according to INEX data, 47.5% of the voters for this year were women. This is a very huge number out of 100%, and of course, you know what that constitutes. Over the years, women have made up and have been seen as great mobilizers for political parties, for candidates who emerge in whatever capacity in the country, from the president to the last person at the local government level. Women have made up great parts of the campaign teams and mobilizers. Yet, women's visibility and participation in public life in Nigeria, it has recorded an all-time low starting from 1999 until date. In fact, yesterday being International Women's Day, the INEC dealt us a heavy blow in the eye by releasing details of women who made it to the National Assembly. Out of 92 women who contested for the Senate, only 3 women made it so far into the House. And one wonders what happened to the other 80 plus women who were running for seats. For the House of Representatives, about 280 something women ran for the seat, and only 15 emerged, winners in their election. So in total, out of 400, and so we have 356 at the House of Representatives and 109 at the Senate. And in total, we have only 18 women who are part of this government, or who are part of the government, pending when supplementary elections in the other places where elections are council will happen. But this is our reality today. And just yesterday, we were thinking Happy International Women's Day. Yet, women in Nigeria seem to not be given the opportunity to thrive in public life. And of course, not, so long ago last year when women were asking for affirmative action at the National Assembly. That request was struck down by legislators at the National Assembly. I have a way in the studio, and of course joining us online as well, no better persons than who I have in the studio with me to discuss the topic, women participation in politics. I'd like to introduce here in the studio Adenike Alobam. She is the program director at DataFile, of course, an inclusion expert, advocating everything like for women here. It is great. Thank you so much for joining us. Hi, and I'd also like to introduce online joining us from the UK, Bukishan Barrett. She is an executive director of Invictus Africa. Good afternoon, Buki. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So Buki is joining us all the way from the UK, and our organization Invictus Africa does a lot of work around bringing us data on what women representation looks like in Nigeria and of course across Africa, and what our ranking is. So Buki, good afternoon again. And I like that I have you on the call because I'll be asking a lot of questions around the numbers, which your organization pays a lot of attention to over time. And to say, first off, what is your immediate reaction, or what was your immediate reaction when the figures or the list came in from INEC 2 nights ago?
I mean, my reaction was I was quite disappointed, and that is because one would think that with the whole advocacy around women representation, the whole conversation around increasing women's participation in political leadership, you would expect that we should begin to see some of the changes, during elections like this. But unfortunately, that is not what we have seen. I'm sure that maybe down the line we can begin to talk about some of the numbers. But straight answer to your question, I have been quite disappointed.
I also echo disappointment. I mean, for me, before sitting here as a journalist, when you look at me, the first thing you see is the woman that I am before the journalist in me, and then seeing that number, where are we? Who then talks about issues, policies affecting women in Nigeria if there are no women in the parliament to have that conversation? How could we come back here to the studio too? I didn't get to say 286 years and 80 years. These are two, separate numbers. Yet last year, the World Economic Forum gave the number to say it would take almost 300 years to breach that equality gap. In 300 years, I won't be here. Definitely.
We won't be here. During the hearing for the Supreme Court of the appointee in America, I remember putting out a post and sort of saying some prayers, and that's how much it affected the kind of conversations that were happening in a country that is considered developed, the kind of conversations that were happening at that time. And I was praying that our daughters would not have to break the ceilings anymore. I was praying that our daughters would not have to fight, for access anymore. But if we go by just the numbers that you called out from the World Economic Forum, it looks like our daughters and our daughters' daughters are still going to be in this fight. And for me, yesterday I struggled to find a reason to be excited about International Women's Day, because it felt like we're not moving. It feels like we're not moving. It feels like there's not a lot of, I keep looking at these numbers. I'm saying 18. Now, I want to start off and say one of the biggest things I've heard as feedback is, well, women don't vote women. And excuse my sarcasm, or maybe don't excuse it. And for me, that felt troubling, because it sounded like, the excuse, the go-to response to not having women in positions of power completely discounts all the barriers that exist to women being able to access these rooms, completely discounts it and limits it down to choice. The question is not a question of choice. Choosing who to vote for is a choice. We do not legislate people's choices. However, we can create institutions and enabling environment to have more women in the room. So we can't, if we allow ourselves to be dragged into, because I felt like everywhere I turned, and I had this conversation a lot yesterday, that was after all is said and done, they come back to, women are not voting women are not supporting women. Aside from the fact that I do believe that this is a borrowed bias, and I would not delve into those details, but I do believe this is a borrowed bias. If you spend all your life being told that a woman is not deserving of a leadership position, the likelihood is when you see a woman presenting to take up that position, the likelihood is that you're going to think you don't deserve to be there. So we have to admit to what has become institutional, generational bias that we are all living through. But even with that, the conversation on women's participation cannot simply be boiled down to the choice. We cannot legislate people's choices. The fact that a woman is on the ballot does not mean automatically every woman should vote that way. What we're saying is, for me, when I saw the results, our report card on Tuesday, what was it? Tuesday. The outcome, though painful, wasn't surprising. To increase the propensity to have more women in power, you have to increase the number of women who were contesting for those positions. And if we don't have a lot more women contesting for those positions, we're going to continue to have these very low outcomes. So it wasn't a surprising outcome, because you look at the numbers, you already see that it's likely to happen, but it was nonetheless disappointing. And the conversation seems to be getting sidetracked in conversations of women. This is not about women not supporting women. This is about the questions around barriers. This is about the questions around equity around what does it take. A lot of the political parties came out and said, oh, funds are free for women. Is that the biggest barrier to women taking up positions? What infrastructures within political systems exist to encourage women to take positions? So, I mean,
you're going to leave it there. I come back to you, Buki, to say, not surprising, yet disappointing what we saw on Tuesday. Speak to me about this, borrowed bias, like I didn't put it, women not voting women. Yet we leave off or leave out the systemic problems, the systemic barriers, challenges that put women behind the box.
I struggle to, I mean, like Adenike, I also, yesterday I struggled with celebrating or commemorating International Women's Day, and that's quite unusual of me because every March 8 I'm also pumped up. And then, usually every March 8, I'll come to your question. We are usually passing on the same message. The same people are designing infographics. We are posting Happy International Women's Day. People are taking pictures. The UN will tell us how to take pictures and all of that, and they will take the pictures and post it. But yesterday, even though we did it, I really struggled, and I struggled because, I mean, we've been collecting all of this data around women's representation for some time. And for the 2023 elections, I mean, we started designing our template and everything, even before the results started coming out, so that when the results come out, we just plug it into, our data collection tool, and then it does the analysis. And when I saw it, I mean, when the INEC list came out, I was still up, I was still online, at the time that list was posted. It was posted in the middle of the night. In fact, one of my colleagues was asking, why do they always work at night? And then when you look at the list, when you count the number of women for the Senate, you only see 2. You will only see 2 Fs. So it means that there is one person, that is Idayat of Lagos West, that was designated as a male. And I tweeted at INEC, and then many people started retweeting it and then insulting INEC. By morning of the next day, they took down the tweet. The same for the House of Reps. There were 2 names that were designated as male, even though they are female. And I pointed it out that numbers 239 and 275, these people are female. But even when we have this representation, INEC still decide to designate some women as men. So when you count it, you still see that the figures are quite bad. So this whole thing around trying to escape it as women are not voting for women, I really don't think that's the problem. And you and I know that there are deeply entrenched psychological, cultural, economical, financial, there are different issues that impact on women's participation. And when we posted the data, somebody tweeted at me, and I just responded to the person yesterday and today, and said, the question is not how many women were voted. The question is how many women contested. Let's look at the figures for the Senate and the House of Reps that we currently have. Or let's even start with the president. The president, so for instance, in this 2023 elections, we had 18 candidates altogether, and we have just one female, the APM candidate, as female. But when you look at the 2019 election, maybe because we had more political parties, we had 73 candidates altogether. And then in that, we had 5 females. That tells you that we have, out of 73, we had 5 women. That was 2019. Let's come down to Senate. At least we have the result for Senate and House of Reps. But before then, let's look at Vice President. This 2023 election is the first time that we will not have a vice presidential candidate that is female. Before now, we always have. So in this 2023 election, let me use 20. In 2007, we had 25 candidates altogether, and we had 4 female candidates. 2011, we had 20 presidential candidates and vice presidential candidates altogether. We had 1 female vice presidential candidate. In 2015, we had 14 vice presidential candidates, and we had 4 women. In 2019, we had 73 vice presidential candidates, and we had 23 female vice presidential candidates. Guess what? For 2023 elections, we had 18 vice presidential candidates and no female. Coming down to, and I'll close with this. Coming down to the Senate and the House of Reps that we already have. For the 2023, half of 2025, we have for 1999 to date. But let me just tell you the one for 2003, and if you need me to reel out for the other ones. For 2023, out of 1,101 senatorial candidates, we had 92 that were female. Of that 92 that were female, only 3 were voted in. Even though we know that there is still going to be elections in 11 senatorial districts, but when we did the analysis, there is no female candidate in any of those 11 senatorial districts. So the chances of having a woman is good. What that tells you is that we are going to have 2.8% female representation in our Senate. Guess what? That is the lowest that we have had, since 1999, except for 1999 when we had 2.4%. And lastly, for House of Reps, out of 3,122 candidates for the House of Representatives, we had 288 as women, and out of that, we had only 15 that were voted in. So I reeled out this number, not to bore you with numbers, but to tell you that the numbers show a very disturbing trend. It tells you that there is no correlation between the effort that seems to be put in and the outcome. And maybe where the problem is the strategy that we think that we are deploying. And that strategy is not coming down. And if any strategy you're doing is not resulting in increased female representation, then it tells you that that strategy is not working.
Yeah, so I want to keep you on the numbers. And like you said, if I want you to read out the numbers, you're happy to do that. So take me from 1999 National Assembly to what the numbers are. And I really don't want to delve into the House of Assembly to see the such story going on there. So let's keep it at the National Assembly to see what's going there. So walk us through what the figures from 1999 said. And just like you said, aside from 1999, 2023 is the lowest so far for the Senate. Please walk us through these numbers.
So which one do you want me to go through with? Would that be the Senate?
Yeah, so the Senate and the House of Representatives. I know that one of your infographics have these numbers sitting side by side there.
Okay, all right. So for instance, for the Senate, 1999 to 2003, we had, of course, use the base as 109 because there are 109 senators. So 1999 to 2003, we had 106 men, that is 97.2% male representation, and we had just 3 women, 2.8 representation. One can excuse that to say that we are just coming out of a military era, an era where men, seem to dominate leadership, and so many socio-cultural factors that feed into why men, are elevated as the leaders. 2003 to 2007, we had 96.3 male representation. That means we had 105, while we have female as 4. That is 3.7%. In 2007, we had 91.7, that is 100 men, and 8.3%, that is 9 women. In 2011, we had 93.6, that is 102 men, while we had 7 women, that is 6.4%. In 2015, we had 93.6 men, that is 102, and we have 6.4 women. And in the current 2019, we have 92.7 men, that's 101 men, and we had 7.3, that is 8 women. That is for the Senate. For the House of Reps, we had in 1999, 96.7 men, that is 348 men, while we had 3.3% as women, that is just 12 women. Again, for the House of House of Representatives, the base figure is usually 360. And then in 2003, we had 339 men, that is 94.2%. And we had 5.8% women, that is 21 women. In 2007, we had 93.1 men, that is 335, and we had 6.9 women, that is 25 women. In 2011, we had 92.8 men, that is 334, and we had 7.2, that is 25 women. In 2015, we had 93.9 men, that is 338 men, and 6.1 women, that is 22 women. And lastly, in 2019, we had 96.4 men, 347, and 3.6 women, that is just 13. In all of this, you will notice that we never went above 7.2 female representation in the House of Representatives. The result for the state houses of assembly is not out, but the same way we have this analysis for Senate and House of Representatives, we also have for the state houses of assembly. And I don't mind sharing this. If you go on my timeline, I shared this infographic on my timeline just yesterday.
Yeah, thank you, Buki. And I had you.
Let me say one last thing. One of the things that we did last year, quarter 4 of last year, was to do what we call Women Representation in African Parliament Index. That is RAPS Index. In that index, benchmarking on what the Interparliamentarian Union brings out on their platform. Nigeria ranks 54 out of 54 countries. I can share this with you as well. We broke it down. We did the same RAPS index for Nigeria in terms of looking at how states, based on their state houses of assembly, how they are faring. We had a lot of those states in Nigeria not faring well in terms of female representation within their parliament. In our analysis, Cross River scored first. That is, out of the 25 seats, there are 20 men, 5 women. And that is not to tell you, and then we ranked it like that. That's not to tell you that states that are doing well, have high women representation, but it's also to just tell you that whether at the African level, where Nigeria ranks 54 out of 54, I can share this infographic with you. Even at the state level, the state that is the best, out of 20 seats in their state houses of assembly, women occupy just 5. That is the state that is the best. And we realize that out of all of those states, 15 of all of these states have no female representation. So currently in Nigeria, there are 15 states in Nigeria that do not have any female representation in their state houses of assembly. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you for those numbers, Buki. And I totally love that we walk through this so that we understand the extent to which we are lacking behind. And 54 out of 54 is a dirty slap in the face for the giants of Africa. And it brings me back to you, Adenike, state strategy.
Okay.
Buki mentioned that, so if we keep doing the same thing over and over again, I try to, take a quick poll of women in politics yesterday while working on the report. And someone said, oh, the fire brigade approach we deploy when it is close to election season is one of the major problems we are having, because this is a marathon, so we need to prepare. And even when so that's from one person. And then the president for Women in Politics Forum, she said stuff like, oh, this might look like we have, seen a setback, but we're working towards 2027.
Okay, I mean, I would have loved to explore that a bit hard to say exactly how I'm working towards 2027. But here's the thing, I have 2 strategies that I think that are important to, I mean, I agree totally with you that obviously something is not working. We have too many people talking about this, planning around this, doing work around gender equality to have these outcomes year in, year out. So I do agree that we need to change strategies. And there are 2 approaches. One is what that person raised about the approach. Even when it comes to democracy as a whole, Participation in democracy is not a 3-month stint of voting in presidential elections and voting in governorship elections. Citizen participation is end-to-end, from one election until the other, which means we're engaged, we're looking, we're watching, we're watchdogging, as citizens are watchdogging. And I think it's the same approach we have to take to driving gender equality, to increasing female representation in governance and politics. It can't be that 1 year to elections we're saying if you're a woman who wants to come, let's support you, because at 1 year to it's already too late. They've decided who is going to go next from now. They've made those decisions from now. So I think that we have to literally light fire, power it with nuclear energy under people's, we have to light fire and keep it going. The second thing, what struck me when the bills were shut down last year was that there was barely a blink in reportage. And at the national level, yes, there was even some, at least they reported they have shut it down. No context, no explanation, no history, no use of the wonderful work that Inviters Africa is doing to say, hey, this is just, they've shut it down. But when you go to the state level, you did not raise a single hair. They're not even aware. Gender equality conversation has to become local. We can't sit at elite table speaking our beautiful English like this, expecting that change is going to happen. The people who make up political parties, who somebody pointed out to me, but after all, it's the Yalogers that go to the market and say, come and vote for them. I said, because the Yalogers do know better. They don't know better. All this beautiful English of gender equality that we're speaking it for ourselves here. They don't know better. So gender equality conversations has to become local. It has to be that while we're working to ensure that it's institutionalized, to pray and hope that we can get affirmative action passed as a law in this country, which is a big hope and prayer. We have to work from the ground up. We have to make it so that when a candidate is going to the Yanoja or the market to say, the first question Yanoja is asking is, who looks like me in your team? So it really needs, it's not a silver bullet, and there are so many layers because we talk about entry barriers. It's not just the money, it's also just the mobilization that needs to happen. It's also dealing with, just years and years of generational bias that is built into us. I have to catch myself when I see a working woman with you. My first instinct is to ask how you're managing. Now, there's an element of that is me also projecting my reality because I know that, yeah, I'm also kind of just balancing all the balls in the air. But the reality is when we look at the man, that's the first thing. Yeah. So even us, are dealing with, we constantly have to check ourselves to check our bias. And then how much more people who are not even aware that they're dealing with bias. So there are many layers of work that needs to be done. But I think these two things, one, it can't be 2 months to election, 3 months to election. Let me make you laugh. INEC has 295 or 296 point something million in their budget for gender and inclusivity. I'm just looking forward to meeting the INEC chairman to say exactly what was that money for? To ask this kind of question. But the reality is now is too late. Asking those questions now is too late. One of the tweets I put out, I was responding to it is, this is not the time to gnash our teeth and say, oh, now there's no representation. This is the time to ask ourselves, how did we all contribute to this outcome? And what else can we do? And I think that driving engagement end to end, not when it's closed because it's already too late. And also gender equality conversations have to become local.
Thank you, Adenike, and I hear your charge to also women on what to do. And to wrap up, will be to ask Buki to tell us, charge women to get to work. What do you have to say? What are your own strategies on ways to do this better?
I think two things. First, I really agree with Adenike, but one major thing that we need to understand, and I think I've said this before somewhere, there's something in law that we usually say that you can't place something on nothing and expect it to stand. So the question is, within what sort of terrain or climate, political climate do we expect that women should be able to thrive? We live in a very patriarchal society, a society that still does not believe in the advancement of women. And until we transform that society into a society where every gate man believes that his wife at home should be able to go to school, where members of the parliament, such as Honorable Kazaure, will not bring his 5 wives to the parliament to prove that they are supposed to be in the kitchen and supposed to be cooking for him. Where every president, every governor believe that women actually have a place, not as a political strategy to have women, in order for them to get some votes, but as a strategy that is based on the fact that that women can indeed perform well. So I think first we need to deal with the society. Societal transformation or gender transformation is not something that will happen overnight. So on one hand, we need to be building a society where everyone believes in the principles of gender equality. On the other hand, we then need to begin to deal with some of the root causes and the proximate factors that impede women. And in that, I dare say, if we have to learn any lesson, if we want to use a one-size-fits-all approach, it will not work. One-size-fits-all approach has not been working. That approach of civic education, an average woman right now, even the market seller, understand politics in her own right. So I'm not discounting the need for civic education, but we pump in money into this whole effort of trying to increase women's representation. But we realize that we're not spending money where we're supposed to be spending money. And then the first thing for me, like I said, in terms of gender transformation or societal transformation, the other thing is for us to now begin to look at what are the impediments that are peculiar to the different societies that women are and that women need to thrive. The kind of impediment that a woman in Lagos State will face is not the kind of impediment that a woman in Adamawa State will face. Intersectionality also come into play. The kind of impediment that a woman in Adamawa State who is blind or who is on a wheelchair and wants to contest for a political party or a political position, the kind of impediment she will face is different. The kind of impediment a poor woman will face is different. So we must always bring in intersectionality. So I will not start reading out 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the things that we must first change the society. And second, we must look at the impediment within the peculiar context of different societies and design strategies that will counter it. One last example I will give. If we think that we are going to do this outside of the women that we are targeting, we will keep failing. We did a project in Chibok or in one of the communities in the Northeast not too long ago, some few years ago. We went to do some school in a bag project. That school in a bag project failed, even though it worked slightly. But because we designed our strategy sitting down in Abuja, by the time we got there, we went to do our post-project impact, and we realized that they were hanging the bags in their houses as a decorative element. Why? The soldiers said that they should not bring their bags to school so that to avoid bombardment. Yet we were designing our strategy sitting in Abuja. We thought it's a fancy idea. In fact, our pictures look good. So we cannot design a strategy outside of the community, the peculiar community of women within their spaces, and expect it to work. So we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach or a one-size-fits-all strategy. It has to be designed with them, by them, and for them. It is only then we should begin to put in money where these strategies have been developed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. And I'll come back to the studio to Adenike to give me one last shot. And I hope that shot is not for me.
Okay, thank you so much. It's always inspiring to hear Vicky talk about, some of the ways that we can do this better. But I want to throw one last challenge at my constituency, which is the media. I've been asking this question of many people. Give me 3 political programs that framed around gender, that created agenda around gender. Give me 3. I dare anyone to mention. Look, I say this and I say it often. If the media reflects it, it exists. If the media doesn't challenge it, it will continue to exist. So for as long as the media itself does not give representation, does not give voice to women, you're reinforcing the idea that women are to be seen and not to be heard. And I know that there are many layers to answering this question, but I do think it's important to say that we need to check ourselves as the media. We desperately need to. Our gatekeeping systems, our framing, our agenda setting. And I know some of these terms are terms that we look at and be like, oh no, that's what you meant. But this is reality. Whatever we say is the issue, even in the day of social media, still gets attention. And by the way, the people in Yola, in Adamawa, in Obuja local government in Imo State, they don't do Twitter. They listen to radio. They watch TV. So when every time there's a political program, all we're seeing are men, what you're telling us is only men are involved in politics. So we need to check ourselves as well.
True. Thank you very much to Adenike and Buki. And I hear your charge very clearly, and I'm sure women around the world, including the men, of course, the he for she's, hear us clearly and would join us in this advocacy, this campaign, the need to socially reform our societies to understand the place of women aside from the kitchen roles and the procreation roles we impose on them more or less, and let's use that word. There's a place for a woman in politics, in the legislature, in the judiciary, and of course anywhere and everywhere she wants to be. So that's a charge from Adenike and Buki on how to better women participation in politics in Nigeria. And that will be the wrap of today's program on Premium Times election updates. Keep it there with us again tomorrow. We'll bring you more updates on elections in Nigeria. My name is Chamaka Okafo. Thank you.
In my polling unit, it was smooth. There was no form of rancor. But then what we had as a result again is also another thing. People were sober. People were in a morning mood, as if they were diseased. As if they were bereaved. Yes.
Why was it that people expected a different result?
The people came out to vote for a change, but what they saw as a result was really a different thing. Yes. So, in other words, people were in sober.
People were disappointed.
Exactly, they were highly disappointed for the result of the election.
So, with the way INEC conducted the election, are you happy with it?
No, it was really a very flawed process. Yes. INEC were really, they were not, in other words, they couldn't follow what they have told us in earlier on, that they were up and doing for the task ahead. Really, yes. For what we saw, it showed that INEC were not, they weren't prepared for the election, or they were being so mischievous. Yes, about the whole thing.
So the Saturday election is coming up.
Yes.
Do you have hopes INEC will correct their
if I'm to judge from what I saw from with the last election, we cannot tell exactly what will be the outcome. If really all they have said that they are prepared for the election, and then it turned out to be a sham. So that, if we're to judge by that, that may really equally dovetail with what is forthcoming at the next Saturday election.
So are you going to participate in forthcoming?
I may or may not. You understand? I have resolved not to even. I have resolved not to ever again get involved in the Nigerian election. Yes, I've resolved never to get myself involved.
Was it as a result of?
Yes. What happened? Yes, indeed. For 2 days I was down. I couldn't sleep. and then I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep, and then I couldn't do anything. And I have a friend who even had a blood pressure, and I know if I go to check my own, it may even be high. So I resolved within me not to ever get so close to it again. In my polling unit, it was smooth. There was no form of rancor. But then what we had